badass ancestors. So after I spent some time climbing along these rocks, I realized there's a lot of spiders on them. So, forewarning, if I scream, no explanation is needed. This is the best location I have been able to find to prop my phone for a bit. So I am going to read the introduction to this book that has been on my to-do read list. Well, let's just say most of the year. I do a lot of audiobooks because I'm in the car a lot, but some you just need to have in your hands so that you can reread as many times as necessary. I swear, I feel like things are going to be crawling on me. Hold on, what is that? I'm brave, but I'm also a sissy. Okay, so our introduction. You can't choose your family. How often have you heard that old chestnut? And it's true. Though while you get to pick your friend circle, your romantic partners, and your co-workers to some degree, you've got no choice when it comes to your kinfolk. And when it comes to relatives, you're stuck with the luck of a random draw. Most of the people whose DNA runs through you have been dead for generations, and all of them, both the living and those who have crossed over the veil, have their own unique quirks, flaws, and personality traits. By learning to work with your ancestral guides, you can build up your own sense of personal empowerment. Now, empowerment is a big word with a lot of different meanings, and it's one that more and more people are embracing. But what exactly does empowerment mean to you personally? Maybe it's a chance to feel like you're in charge of your life and the things that happen to you. Perhaps you want to feel more involved in how you respond and react to the people and events in the world around you. Or just possibly, you want to feel like you can handle any curveball that life throws at you and be stronger emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Yes, please. For some people, working with ancestral guides is a way to heal from trauma. They say that trauma can be passed through generations. If that's the case, then certainly healing can be as well. So why not call upon your ancestors to help you navigate the murky waters of recovery, self-guidance, and wellness? If your ancestors themselves were the cause of your trauma, you can break the cycle or suffering by interacting with them. After all, if unpleasantness runs in your family, isn't it about time for it to run out? We can't change the past, but we sure can face it head on and refuse to let it define us. You can also work with your relations for assistance in the mundane, material things. You might petition them for protection, requesting them to watch over you in times of trouble. Try asking them for help out with things like financial matters. For example, do you have a dream of buying yourself a house or opening your own business? That's where your ancestors may just be able to step in and intervene. By embracing their power, we allow ourselves to develop our own. Have you ever really thought about who your people were and where they came from? Some of them did wonderful things. And let's not kid ourselves. Some of them were pretty unpleasant. But all of them can be called upon to tap into our inner strength, help us set boundaries, and find wisdom and guidance when we need it the most. So how do we do that exactly? We all want to find our power and feel like we're in control of our own futures, but have sort of forgotten how. Let's face it, we're busy. There are plenty of us who feel like we have lost our connection to the sacred. More specifically, while we try to embody sacred principles, we find ourselves failing miserably and then beating ourselves up over it. In fact, we often judge ourselves against the standards of our forefathers. Forebears. Great-grandma drove a munitions jeep in World War II. Uncle Bill fought in Vietnam. Great-great-aunt so-and-so rode across the prairie in a covered wagon and survived cholera 3 times on the Oregon Trail. What on earth would they think of us, knowing that we are one broken shoelace away from a complete breakdown simply because we forgot that one of our kids had soccer practice Tuesday night at 5? If your ancestors are anything like mine, they'd probably tell you to sit down, be quiet, have a nice hot cup of pity party tea, probably also spiked with some bourbon, and then let you get your act together. Chin up, kids. For many of us, finding that sense of personal power that our ancestors had can be a challenge. Thanks to modern society's time constraints and the never-ending demands on our schedules. As mentioned earlier, we're busy, women particularly, but men as well, focusing on other people. We're raising children, making sure our romantic partners are getting their needs met, caring for aging parents, and doing the emotional labor for our families and our households. We're working full-time, and we find ourselves under constant pressure to do more, to be more. We live in a world that is constantly reminding us that, for whatever reasons, we're just not good enough no matter what. Lose weight, gain weight, wear more makeup, wear less makeup, stay home with your kids, go have a career. Yet for thousands of years, people have managed to live through far more stressful situations than delivering a kid late to kindergarten, breaking a nail, or double booking meetings at work. Our ancestors were survivors of things far more frightening than our first world problems. They were strong. How do we know that? Because you're here. Your bloodline survived millennia of plague, war, pestilence, famine, infant mortality, and just plain old bad luck. Just to make you. That means your ancestors were badasses. I started researching my own family history more than 30 years back. Hey, that resonates with me. Back in the days when you couldn't just hop online, plug a name into a search engine, and come back with thousands of results. This was the late 80s. Well, technically, I really started in 91, maybe 90. So, when genealogy research then involved writing letters to old ladies in dusty archives somewhere and hoping that in a few months your self-addressed stamped envelope, many people don't even remember what those are, would come back with a copy of a marriage certificate from the 19th century. And more often than not, it didn't, because she couldn't find it. And then you started the process all over again, writing to a different little old lady in a different dusty archive 2 counties over. Over the past 3 decades, I've uncovered a lot of different types of people, from criminals to kings and sinners to literal saints. And they're all connected to me, either by blood or marriage. And I'll be the first to admit that some of them are problematic for me. A few of my people were wealthy landowners in colonial Virginia, which entails everything you're thinking it does. It's been an uncomfortable truth to acknowledge that people in my bloodline enslaved other human beings. But it's a fact, and it is unavoidable. In 1892, my great-something grandfather killed his wife, and then himself, in an alcohol-fueled fit of temporary insanity, or at least that's what the newspaper said the coroner's inquest verdict was. That one was kept quiet for a long time, and I learned about it when my great-grandmother blurted it out one night at dinner, much to the abject shock and horror of my great-grandfather, who was the grandson of the deceased couple. I've got another distant connection who sailed down the Ohio River in 1797 to make the Kentucky frontier safe for white settlers, and in doing so, earned himself the nickname Indian Bill, because he took so many native scalps. A few more did awful things during the years immediately following the Civil War. A couple of other far-off cousinly connections made their way out to the Old West and became famous gunslingers, and there are mixed reviews about their penchants for shooting those who caused them offense. Woo! That looked like a horse fly, but there should be no horses around here. And what a timing. I am taking note of that visitor. So these are problem ancestors for me, but they are mine. It's pretty much a guarantee that you'll encounter some of your own as well. And we'll talk later about how to deal with these types of people when doing spiritual ancestor work. But keep in mind that in addition to the kinfolk who did really bad things, there are also plenty who did wonderful stuff. Well, we're only a few pages into the introduction, and I already see what's coming for me because I have already walked this path, and it's true. There are things that are horrifying, and nothing we can do to change it. But hopefully, I'm wrong there. I just said nothing to do to change it, but I don't think that's true. Like, we can't go back and change history, but I think we can change the energy of the events and find healing. Hopefully not just for ourselves. Me personally, I intend on doing some road trips to some of our ancestral lands where I know things have occurred. There are no words for how tragic and horrific. And I need to pray for forgiveness for those who did not know better or felt they had no choice. But either way, they took that path. Okay, I am getting detoured here. I have found people who were brave and heroic, a handful of Revolutionary War soldiers, women who survived plagues, famine, and the endless cycles of childbirth and nursing and keeping families together, doctors and dentists and sailors and artists and inventors and teachers, and a king who was so popular he later got canonized as a saint. Immigrants from Western Europe and England and Ireland who ended up in Chicago to work as laborers, blacksmith, and cabinet makers, Scottish freedom fighters, as well as a couple of Frenchmen who tried to kill an unjust king, Huguenots who fled religious persecution and made their way to the New World, and Quakers who fought for the abolition of slavery. My grandfather, one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life, was a scout pilot in World War II and told great stories about his wartime adventures in Europe. I claim all of them, with all of their many facets, good and bad alike. What or who do we mean when talking about ancestors exactly? There are different types. Familial ancestors are a part of our family. The badasses who came before us somewhere in our family tree. They are your grandparents, great-grandparents, and even your extended network of aunts, uncles, and cousins. They are the people who, by virtue of either bloodline, marriage, fosterage, or adoption, are your family. If you consider someone your ancestor, whether they are in your direct line or part of the outward-reaching spiderweb of your family DNA, then for the purposes of this book, they are your ancestor. There are also archetypal ancestors who may or may not be genetically related, but share a kinship with us as archetypes. That might appear as a warrior, a healer, a peacemaker, or any other symbolic feature you can, figure you can imagine. We may or may not be able to identify them concretely, or perhaps they show up as a spiritual being, such as a mystic, monk, priestess, or even in a figure such as Jesus, Mary, or the Buddha. Finally, we have ancestors of the heart, or the spirit ancestors, and these are people we have connected to throughout our life who may not be related to us by blood or marriage, but consider us family nonetheless. The high priestess who taught you everything you know, your best friend's mom, who made you brownies every weekend at sleepovers, or that elderly neighbor you've sort of adopted as your own because he's lonely and kind and sings delightfully bawdy sea shanties. Keep in mind that for genealogical and linguistic purposes, an ancestor is someone from whom you're directly descended, your parents, grandparents, and so on. Family members who call you an ancestor, children and grandchildren, are your descendants. If you suffered the tragedy of losing a child or grandchild, you can certainly work with them and speak to them. as one of your beloved dead on your altar, even though they are not technically an ancestor. After all, the rest of your kinfolk are probably watching over them, keeping them safe, and guiding them in the realm of those who have passed on until you join them someday yourself. In many cultures around the globe, ancestors are venerated and honored. But for those of us in the Western world, somewhere along the way, we became so immersed in doing really important things that we stopped paying attention to the voices of our ancestors. It's not that they aren't talking to us. We're just not paying attention. Every single one of us has badass ancestral guides who are just screaming to be heard. Once you open yourself up to actually listening to them, you can form a relationship that will allow you to work with them both as a group and one-on-one. But hold on a minute. Work with them? You're probably wondering if that's a typo. Shouldn't it be maybe worship? Well, no. The word worship has some very distinct implications. And while you're certainly welcome to worship any of your ancestors that you may want, try thinking of it more in terms of working in tandem with them. Despite whatever spiritual path you may have grown up with, ancestral guides typically don't expect you to follow them, but to walk beside them. Again, it's about building a relationship. To look at it another way, imagine you and I ran into each other in Starbucks, not knowing each other, and I looked at you over my, look, I heard Starbucks and I got completely distracted. I'm going to start that back over. I do not have a coffee. I know that's kind of surprising. I got water, y'all. I brought water. All right, I'm doing this again. To look at it another way, imagine you and I ran into each other in Starbucks and not knowing each other, and I looked over at you over my, look, I just can't even get it out. It's distracting me. I want a nice coffee. All right, maybe it's the way this sentence is. All of the commas. No, look, I'm trying to deflect accountability for my lack of being able to pay attention. Here we go. To look at it another way, imagine you and I ran into each other in Starbucks, not knowing each other, and I looked at you over my iced coffee, a splash of coconut milk, 2 pumps of classic, and a shot of espresso, and I said, hey, we have never met, but I've got this thing and I really need your help with it. Can you stop what you're doing and give me some money and also pay attention to me for a few weeks or months or even years so I can get what I want? Maybe that's why I didn't want to get something like that out there. No. I'm guessing your answer would be no, because you don't know me and I don't know you. You're right, we don't have a relationship and you owe me nothing. And really, can you put aside all of the other things in your life to help me do these big things with no reciprocal benefit to yourself? Frankly, I'd be worried about you if you were the sort of person who'd say yes to such an obnoxious, presumptuous request. Well, on the other hand, if we've already got a friendship and I tell you that I could really use your aid with something, you might just be able to offer your support in some way. You might gift me with guidance and insight, wisdom and suggestions, or perhaps even material or financial assistance if I really needed it. If you're able to build meaningful relationships with your people, you'll find that they will be there for you when you need a badass ancestor in your life the most. In Badass Ancestors, Finding Your Power with Ancestral Guides, we're going to explore how you can work with these different types of ancestors to find, develop, and ultimately celebrate the personal power of your own inner badass. This fly is back, but no spiders. I don't know which is worse, actually. All right, to begin, we will explore the history of ancestor veneration around the world. Why should any of us spend our time talking and listening to those who are long since dead? And what advice could they have to give us? By looking back at the history of ancestor veneration around the world in different cultures, we can incorporate our knowledge of the past into present-day actions. And next, plan on a crash course in genealogy research. I'm ready for that one. And if you've never studied your family tree, ancestor work is a great catalyst for it. And let me tell you, once you get started, it's easy. It is so easy to become addicted. Just saying. I've been there a lot. All right, now where was I? See, I keep getting sidetracked. Get to know the people whose blood runs through your veins and their history. Awareness of your ancestor stories will help you connect with them on a much deeper level than just a collection of names and dates. This will also include some tips on honoring ancestral guides if you're adopted or have voluntarily chosen to sever family ties. You'll learn how to uncover these ancestral guides. Where are they? And what do they want? It's time to work with them on an individual and collective basis. So we'll discuss some daily meditations and personal power mantras that you can use to build self-confidence, empowerment, and overall badassery with your ancestors' assistance. We'll also talk about how to work directly with your kinfolk. After all, they have your own unique set of needs and wants. What do they demand from us? And what is the best way to honor them? Should we just offer some milk and cookies and call it a day? Or is there more involved when calling upon our badass ancestors? What should you be asking them for? This section will address the key takeaways of working with familial spirits, archetypes, and heart ancestors in a respectful and mutually beneficial manner. Of course, we'll also have a discussion about the problem ancestors mentioned earlier, because let's face it, some of us come from stock that we're not exactly thrilled about. However, for better or worse, these people are still a part of your DNA, and they still have made you the person you are today. In addition to finding and identifying your people, Badass Ancestors focuses on a series of rituals, meditations, and other practices that can be used to bring us closer to those who have walked before us. You'll learn how to set up an ancestor shrine. Whoop, that fly! Make offerings, I need to sage. Make offerings and work respectfully with your kinfolk. You'll discover ways to welcome your guides into your own life in a way that impacts your physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Each of these workings will include specific calls to action. Ultimately, this is a book designed for anyone who's ready to embrace their personal power and wishes to feel a deeper, stronger sense of connection to their heritage, their family, and their spiritual world. It's for anyone who's ever looked at the people in their family tree and thought, wow, she was a badass. I wish I could be more like her. And it is my hope that by working with the ancestors, using the, go away! Sorry, that fly is now harassing me. I think he knows I called it out. It is my hope that by working with the ancestors, using the ideas in this book, you'll find the empowerment, strength, and badassery that you have been looking for. Chances are, you've had it all along. Yes, and he is just sitting there rubbing those ugly front paws together. Well, paws, feet, whatever they are. They gotta go. All right, I need to go grab my sage and my essential oil. This fly needs to go. All right, y'all. I'm gonna pull an ancestry card from the Ancestor Spirit deck after I take a walk through the bird reserve over here and get some photos. Thank you for joining me.